They didn't ask for her name. They dropped her ID like it was garbage. No one stopped to help, but everyone watched. She held a $2 million check in her hand, but they only saw her skin. So she didn't raise her voice. She raised the system. Now the whole bank is about to learn who she really is. Her name was Amara Lewis, and in that moment, she stood still, composed. Her expression calm, but her silence was not surrender. It was power. She wore a simple navy blazer. Her shoes were scuffed from use, her skin rich and smooth, and her poise carved from years of quiet storms. To the bystanders, she was invisible, but to herself, she was iron. Earlier that afternoon, the sun had blazed over the streets of downtown Atlanta as Amara stepped into the icy foyer of Whitestone Financial. The glass doors whispered shut behind her, sealing in soft piano music and the sterile scent of wealth. Everything inside gleamed. The marble floors, the velvet ropes, even the receptionist's polished nails. Amara adjusted her lapel and walked toward the teller counter. She wasn't here for advice, just a deposit. A simple, routine transaction. Behind the counter stood Haley, a blonde woman with glossy curls, her white blouse spotless and stiff. Her eyes never left the computer screen. Amara waited. 1 second, 2, 10. Nothing. "Hello," Amara said gently. No reply. But when a white man in a charcoal suit walked in seconds later, Haley's entire posture changed. She stood. She smiled. Her voice dripped with warmth. "Good afternoon, Mr. Adler." Amara blinked, keeping still. She wasn't shocked, just tired. When Haley finally glanced back at her screen, Amara tried again, voice soft but steady. "Excuse me. I'd like to make a deposit." Haley didn't respond. She exhaled through her nose, annoyed, and flicked her wrist toward the row of tellers without looking up. "Over there," she muttered. Amara gave a polite nod, as if it hadn't just stung. She walked to the next counter. A few minutes passed. Then it was her turn. She placed her government ID and a certified check gently on the counter. The check was from her company's business partner. Nothing suspicious, nothing unusual, except her skin. Haley, now at this counter again, picked up the ID like it was dirty. She looked at it, then looked at Amara. Then she dropped it. Not by accident, not clumsily, but deliberately. It clattered to the floor, echoing off the polished tiles like a slap. For a second, the entire lobby froze, and still, no one moved. Amara crouched slowly, never breaking eye contact, and retrieved her ID. Her movements were precise, controlled. Her silence screamed louder than any outrage. Haley didn't blink. But Amara? She was already starting to understand. This wasn't just about banking. It was about belonging. And this place had just told her, without a word, that she didn't. She stood up. But something inside her had already begun to rise. Amara didn't storm off. She didn't raise her voice. She simply adjusted her collar, pressed the check flat on the counter, and waited. The way the world always asked her to wait, quietly, respectfully, no matter how many times it failed her. The teller's eyes narrowed. Haley picked up the check like it was counterfeit, held it under the light, and tilted her head. "This is large," she muttered, like it was an accusation. "What company is this from again?" Amara kept her voice level. "Stonebrook Developers. I'm the managing partner." Haley's lips twitched. Not a smile, but a smirk. "You're the partner?" A few heads turned. Someone snickered behind her. It was quick, almost quiet, but not quiet enough. "What's your company's registration number?" Haley asked, tapping her nails on the desk. "Where's your headquarters? Who signed the check?" One question after another, none of them routine. All of them designed to rattle her. It wasn't protocol. It was a test, a trap. Amara answered each one calmly, but her chest was starting to tighten. She could feel it, the heat rising to her face, the shame crawling up her spine. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she was once again standing in a place that made her justify her existence. When she finished speaking, Haley leaned toward the teller next to her. a red-haired woman named Brittany, who had been eavesdropping with thinly veiled amusement. Haley whispered something, but her voice was just loud enough. "Looks fake to me," she said. Brittany smiled faintly, eyes flicking to Amara's shoes, her blazer, her hands. "Could be. You know how they do." They. That word hit like a nail to the heart. Amara stayed silent. Her hand twitched toward the check, but she stopped herself. She wasn't going to flinch. Not here. "I want you to verify it," she said. Her tone was calm, but a thread of steel ran through it. Haley rolled her eyes and started typing. Slowly. Like this was a waste of her time. As Amara waited, her eyes scanned the room. Nobody looked at her. And yet she felt watched from every angle. Judged. Labeled. People shifting uncomfortably, pretending not to see. In the far corner, the receptionist Claire, a woman in a pearl cardigan and rose-gold glasses, pretended to type something while side-eyeing the scene with mild disdain. The glass doors opened and a couple walked in. White, wealthy, dressed for an afternoon of luxury. Claire lit up. "Welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. Hanley. We'll have your drinks waiting in the VIP lounge." Amara watched them walk past without a glance in her direction. Claire didn't even acknowledge her. The contrast was suffocating. She turned back toward Haley, who was now whispering again to Brittany. "This looks sketchy," Haley said, louder this time. Amara took a breath. Her fingers curled slightly, pressing into her palm. Not because she was angry, but because she was holding in everything that wanted to shatter. And then, from the side office, a tall man in a tailored gray suit emerged. Mid-50s. Stern expression. He adjusted his cufflinks with care. His nameplate read, "Mr. Warren Blake, branch manager." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the scene unfolding at his teller counter. Amara met his gaze. Finally, someone in charge. But when he spoke, his voice was clipped. Cold. "What seems to be the issue here?" Haley stood straighter, instantly polite. "Sir, this customer brought in a large check, but I'm seeing inconsistencies." Blake turned to Amara, scanning her from head to toe. His eyes paused on her unbranded bag, her modest shoes, and then, a pause too long. He held out his hand for the check. She gave it to him, firm, steady, unafraid. He barely glanced at it. "I'm sorry," he said. "This transaction doesn't meet our verification standards. You might want to try another institution." He turned away before she could speak. And that's when something inside her, something quiet and old and burning, finally lit a fuse. But she didn't explode. Not yet. Amara stood motionless as Mr. Blake's polished shoes clicked across the marble and vanished into his office. No room for conversation, no curiosity. Just dismissal, efficient and final. The check still rested in her hand, crisp and valid, like evidence no one wanted to see. She stared at it. Not because she doubted it, but because she couldn't believe how effortlessly her truth had just been brushed aside. Around her, the bank hummed back into its usual rhythm, like nothing had happened. Like the slow, humiliating breakdown of a human being didn't disturb the air. Haley adjusted her headset and turned to the next customer. Brittany tapped away at her screen, a smirk hiding behind the glow. Claire laughed softly with another guest. The room moved on, but Amara hadn't. She walked toward the front desk. Her heels echoed with restraint, every step calculated, every breath even. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her collapse. Claire didn't even look up. Her fingers clicked lazily on the keyboard. "Excuse me," Amara said gently. "Nothing." "Could I speak with the manager again?" Claire raised a manicured hand without lifting her eyes, a flat signal to wait. Then, slowly, she muttered, "He's busy. You'll have to come back." No apology, no offer to help, no eye contact. Amara opened her mouth, about to speak again. But then the glass doors whooshed open. A young white woman in designer heels walked in, phone in hand, not even breaking stride. Claire's posture changed instantly. She stood, smiled. "Welcome to Whitestone, ma'am. What can I do for you?" Amara stepped back. The contrast was no longer just offensive. It was surgical. The teller smiled. The receptionist stood tall. The branch moved for her. And Amara? Amara had become air. The woman breezed past toward the VIP area. Claire sat down again. No acknowledgement of Amara's existence. Just the empty space between them. But Amara wasn't going to vanish. She returned to the counter. Haley raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Brittany barely glanced her way. "This check is real," Amara said, her voice calm but firm. "And this treatment is unacceptable." Haley gave a brittle laugh. "Ma'am, we have standards." "You mean prejudice dressed as protocol?" Amara's words landed sharp, without raising her tone. Brittany leaned closer to Haley, whispering again. But this time, Amara heard it. "People like her always get so dramatic." People like her. Amara froze, not out of shock, but from the crushing familiarity of it. She turned, and that's when she saw them. The other clients watching from the benches, from the velvet ropes, from the hallways. Some looked away quickly. Others held her gaze for half a second before returning to their business. They had seen, and they had chosen silence. Amara reached into her bag and pulled out her business card. She placed it on the counter. "Read it." Haley rolled her eyes, picked it up, and went pale. Amara Lewis, managing partner, Stonebrook Developers. The logo was embossed. The card was real. And the company? A major client of Whitestone Financial. For a split second, the smugness drained from Haley's face. Then Brittany leaned over again. "Anyone can print a card." Amara had heard enough. "I want to speak to someone above Blake," she said. "There is no one above him at this branch," Haley said with finality. Amara stepped back, her fingers tightening around the check. But her voice stayed steady. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not until someone explains why I was treated this way." And just then, behind the frosted glass wall of the executive offices, a shadow moved. Someone else had been watching. And they weren't supposed to be in that room. The frosted glass flickered again. A tall silhouette moved with purpose, then paused, just long enough for Amara to sense that whoever was behind that wall had seen everything. Not just the dropped ID or the smirks or the deflection, but the weight of it, the humiliation, the quiet war unfolding in plain sight. Moments later, the door opened. A man in a sleek navy suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes swept over the room like a scan. He wasn't part of the front desk crew. His name tag, crisp and understated, read, "Daniel Everett, Regional Oversight Officer." Haley froze. Brittany straightened. Even Claire, across the lobby, stopped mid-conversation. Amara didn't flinch. Daniel's eyes landed on her. "Miss Lewis," she said. "Amara Lewis." He nodded. "Would you mind stepping into my office for a moment?" Haley's throat bobbed. Brittany's fingers trembled slightly against the keyboard. Claire was already typing a panicked message under the desk. Amara followed Daniel down the corridor, past the plush seating area and the towering framed mission statements. Inside his glass-walled office, the noise of the lobby faded behind a smooth, silent door. Daniel gestured toward the chair. "Please." Amara sat, upright, calm, dignified. "I've been monitoring the customer service logs," he began, his tone professional but alert. "I noticed some irregularities, and then I saw the live feed." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Amara spoke clearly. "I came here with a certified check from my company's business partner. I was treated as if I were trying to defraud your bank." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know." He reached for the check still in her hand. She passed it over slowly. As he examined it, something in his expression shifted. Not surprise, but confirmation. "Stonebrook Developers. That's not just any partner." Amara said nothing. Daniel continued. "You signed the expansion contract last quarter. I saw your name on the corporate agreement for our Midtown project." "I did," she said. He looked up. For the first time, his voice lowered. "Miss Lewis, I apologize. But Amara raised a hand. Don't. Daniel blinked. She leaned forward slightly. I don't need an apology. I need accountability. I need to know why every employee in that lobby assumed I was a criminal. Why my ID was dropped on the floor. Why the branch manager didn't even let me speak. Daniel didn't look away. You're right, she continued, voice calm but firm. This wasn't about banking. This was about bias, and silence, and complicity. A beat of silence passed. Then Daniel stood. I need to show you something. He walked to a panel on the wall and tapped a screen. Security footage from earlier that day appeared. Haley sneering, Brittany laughing, the ID falling, Mr. Blake turning away. Each clip was silent, but the story they told screamed through every frame. Amara didn't move. She'd lived it already. I'll be forwarding this to corporate, Daniel said. Immediately. And the staff? Amara asked. There will be action, he said. Another pause. Then Daniel added, Would you be willing to speak with our executive board? Amara hesitated, not because she was afraid, but because part of her had stopped expecting change a long time ago. I'll consider it, she said, but not for me. For the next person who walks into this bank and looks like me. Daniel nodded, slowly, as if just beginning to understand the scope of what had really happened. As he handed back her check and business card, he said one final thing. Miss Lewis, you don't owe this institution anything. But if you do speak, they'll listen. Amara stood. She took one last glance through the glass wall, where Haley and Brittany were now visibly shaken, stealing nervous glances toward the office. She didn't gloat. She didn't glare. She simply said, under her breath, Now let's see who they really listen to. The next morning, the bank's executive wing was no longer calm. It buzzed like a pressure chamber seconds before rupture. Email threads flew. Security tapes were archived and copied. Words like compliance breach, internal review, and public liability surfaced in hushed meetings. And at the center of it all stood Amara Lewis. Not behind the teller line this time, but in the upper boardroom of Whitestone Financial's Southeast headquarters. She hadn't worn anger. She'd worn authority. Her suit today was black, sharply tailored, every line of her posture declaring what the name on her business card never needed to prove again. She stood in front of a long glass table lined with VPs, legal advisors, PR consultants, and the bank's president himself. At one end sat Michael DeWitt, the regional president, late 50s, silver hair, cufflinks stamped with the bank's crest. When Amara walked in, he stood, a signal of respect no one had shown her 24 hours ago. Miss Lewis, he said, clearing his throat. Thank you for coming. Amara didn't nod. She didn't smile. She laid down a manila folder with a soft thump. Inside are the names of the employees involved, surveillance timestamps, and printed emails I've received since yesterday, some apologizing. Most, not. DeWitt slowly opened the folder. The contents hit him harder than the silence. I'm not here to demand an apology, she said, voice level. I'm here to make sure you understand that what happened in your lobby is not a public relations inconvenience. It's a culture, a mindset, a failure so ordinary, it thought I would walk away. No one interrupted. She stepped toward the end of the table. I'm a black woman, a CEO, and a partner in your billion-dollar expansion deal. But that lobby didn't see any of that. They saw my skin, my shoes, and my silence, and they judged me. DeWitt's jaw tightened. Others exchanged glances, some scribbling notes that meant nothing. I don't want a media spectacle, she said, but I do want this. Mandatory anti-bias training, independent oversight, and a signed commitment from this board that every Whitestone location will implement a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, customer-facing or internal. DeWitt looked up. You'll have it. She didn't thank him. Also, she added, I want a written letter sent to every staff member at the Midtown branch, from this office, acknowledging the incident and confirming action is being taken. Silence is no longer an option. Someone at the far end of the table tried to shift the conversation. Miss Lewis, with respect, this is highly irregular. Amara turned her eyes toward him. So is watching someone drop my ID on the floor and being told to take my business elsewhere, while holding a check worth more than half this board's quarterly salaries combined. The man fell silent. DeWitt exhaled. Understood. She gathered the folder, paused, then placed one last item on the table, a signed contract. The same one her company had originally negotiated. I was going to walk away, but instead, I'm giving your bank one last opportunity to earn my trust again. She turned and walked toward the door, not with vengeance, with purpose. And as she reached for the handle, DeWitt's voice stopped her. One last question, Miss Lewis. Why didn't you go public? She looked over her shoulder. Because I didn't need a headline, she said. I needed a shift. And now the whole bank was starting to tilt. The air outside the Whitestone Tower felt heavier than the day before, not because of heat, but because of weight. The kind that settles in after you've told the truth in a room full of people who finally had no choice but to listen. Amara stepped out of the building, the echo of her heels fading against the stone as she walked toward a future she had quietly redrawn. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The shift had already begun behind her. Within 48 hours, Whitestone Financial's leadership issued a formal statement to its entire workforce. A zero-tolerance policy for bias, new reporting protocols, and a company-wide commitment to anti-discrimination training. Names weren't mentioned, but everyone in the building knew who had sparked the change. The Midtown branch? It was a different place now. Haley, the once smirking teller, was no longer behind the glass. She was quietly dismissed after video footage made it undeniable. Brittany, her whispering colleague, was suspended without pay and placed under mandatory training. Her laughter now a stain on her own reputation. Claire, the cold receptionist, resigned within a week, unable to face the growing scrutiny. And Mr. Warren Blake, the manager who turned his back, was transferred and demoted. His silence cost him more than status. It cost him credibility. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about reflection. And what came after? Because Amara hadn't gone home to celebrate. She went back to her office, a small brick building in West Atlanta where her real work lived. Inside was a whiteboard filled with plans, sticky notes, and something brand new. A program called the First Look Initiative. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't even funded yet. But it was Amara's answer to the question no executive had asked in that boardroom. How many other black entrepreneurs had been denied that first look? That first ounce of trust? That first chance? So she built it. Slowly, quietly. Workshops, mentorship circles, partnerships with community banks who were ready to unlearn. Young black women and men walked into rooms where their names weren't doubted, their credentials weren't questioned, and their shoes weren't used against them. And they walked out changed. Word spread. Fast. One morning, Amara received a letter, not typed, but handwritten in trembling cursive. It was from Mr. Blake. Miss Lewis, I failed you. Not just in silence, but in presence. You stood taller than I ever could in the face of something I never had to feel. You've built something far stronger than a contract. You've built a mirror, and I saw myself. Thank you for forcing me to look. She folded the letter, placed it beside a growing stack of notes. All from people who once dismissed her, and now couldn't forget her. Weeks later, at a local business leadership conference, Amara was invited to speak. She wore the same shoes she wore that day at the bank. Still scuffed, still hers. She walked on stage to a silent room. She didn't tell them about racism, or dignity, or lawsuits. She asked one question. What if we trusted someone the first time they told us who they are? The room held its breath. Among the audience sat former clients, new allies, and even Michael DeWitt, seated quietly in the back, watching the woman who had done what no policy ever could, expose the culture beneath the surface. Amara's eyes scanned the room, but her voice stayed low. I didn't ask for this story, but I'm going to use it, not to shame, but to make sure no one else has to earn their worth just to be seen. As applause rose like a slow tide, she stepped back. And when she left that stage, she wasn't just a CEO. She was a mirror. She didn't burn bridges. She rebuilt roads others could walk too. a reflection the world could no longer ignore. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful journeys.